URC power ranking, folks. People have been asking about these for ages. Where are they at? I stopped doing them for such a long time in the URC because the competition was so disjointed with all the cancellations and some teams having played loads more games than other teams. I have spent the last few hours backtracking on all the results, filling in all the gaps and trying to get a current set of power rankings out. So we're going to do that now. Although I'm going to put it out here right now up front and say I'm not really happy with how they turned out. Every year I do power rankings. I started it with Super Rugby back in the day. I've been doing it for the Premiership and Super Rugby Pacific and now the URC. Every year I kind of try and tinker around with it to get it to work a little bit better. I don't think it's working with the URC. It's looking alright with the same formula. It's nothing flash. It's a pretty basic one, but it's working with the Premiership. Super Rugby, I had to adjust to kind of debuff the Aussie teams who have seemingly been a wee bit weaker, given 4 out of their 5 teams lost in the last week. I may need to do something in future with the URC to kind of maybe debuff the Italian and maybe some of the Welsh teams. We will see, because the way the competition's working, like I try to give you kind of more credit for beating strong teams and less credit for weak teams, but I don't think it's quite worked out properly. But anyway, we're still going to run through it. I'm not going to change it all before the end of the URC season because there's only a few rounds to go, but we'll put this out there. I'm just saying up front, I don't think these rankings are that great. The whole idea is you get more credit for beating strong teams, you get more credit for winning away, and also you kind of get punished for losing at home, you get punished for losing by a big margin, that kind of thing. That's the logic behind it. But I don't think the weighting of the teams has kind of worked all that well. But anyway, I hope the people who've been asking for it appreciate me finally getting these out. Thank you for being patient. Right, 16th, Zebre. Unsurprisingly, they are winless. They were never going to be anywhere else. Surprisingly, though, for a while, because I've been filling it in week by week, they weren't always last. Because there were some weeks where they just didn't play for a bunch of weeks and other teams were getting losses. So the other teams were kind of getting punished. And these guys were just sitting there without some games. But they've mostly caught up now, I think. No wins for them. They're on like 4 points for the entire competition. So, yeah, that's Zebre. I've got Cardiff here in 15th, which is a little bit worse than they are on the actual table. They're in 14th on the table. They're on a pretty bad run, folks. What can I say? The season has not finished well for Cardiff Rugby. So, yeah, 15th is the spot for them. Dragons are here in 14th, so they kind of swap places with Cardiff from the actual log. For a while, Dragons were in last or in kind of second to last, but they did get one win recently, which is kind of, you know, one little bonus which perks them up a wee bit. And then Benetton, who unfortunately have to deal with the fact that they had half their Italian team out during the Six Nations, which is again one of the problems with this year's format with all the catch-up games and having to play games during the Six Nations period and whatnot. That Benetton was severely weakened. They're also on a pretty bad run. So this is what I mean about maybe needing to kind of debuff some of the teams here that I did maybe with the Aussies and Super Rugby, but I've not done, so it's led to a little bit of some lopsided stuff. I think that bottom row actually looks pretty fine. I'm pretty happy with that. It's this next row that I don't necessarily agree with. The Lions are in 12th. Now, the Lions have been on an amazing run, but they did drop a couple of games, which is more than we can say for all the South African teams. So the Lions also had a really horrible start to the season. So they were always kind of clawing their way back a wee bit, but I do think in recent times the Lions have looked better than the 12th best team, which is maybe more than you can say for the Ospreys, who started the competition well and really kind of went off the boil. The Ospreys are in 11th. And the Lions are in 12th on the actual table. So maybe that's kind of fair. I'm not sure. I do feel like if you're doing power rankings that it's supposed to be on more recent form. I know the Lions did drop their most recent game at home. But the Lions have had a more recent, better time than the Ospreys. But anyway. Because I do try to kind of also give less credit to results from like round 1, 2, and 3. And more weight on the results which are recent. But anyway. Now, don't laugh, because Ulster's come out here in 10th. Now, Ulster, for goodness sake, are 5th on the table. For a while, they were in 1st. I think part of the reason is Ulster's on a 3-game losing run, which has seen them plummet in the way I'm calculating it currently. But when I see the teams they lost to, Munster, Stormers and Bulls, 1 at home, 2 games away, this is where I'm talking about maybe I need to be giving that kind of less punishment if you're losing to teams that are doing as well as those 3 teams are. So, yes, this is one that I'm not particularly chuffed with. And then Connacht has come in here at 9th. Connacht did beat the Lions away, and they beat Benetton recently. So, they've kind of had a little bit of an upward swing. There's not much between them and Connacht. And between them and Ulster in the way I'm currently calculating it. But as I said, I will be looking at changes for next year. The next row sees Edinburgh over here. And maybe it was a sign also that Edinburgh were too highly ranked early in the competition. Because I remember when I was doing the power rankings early, Edinburgh were ranked really high. And people were saying to me, no, Edinburgh's too high. They're playing weak teams. And they did seem to lose some of those kind of key matchups throughout there. They didn't lose all of them. I think they did beat a couple of the big guns, but not enough to kind of justify being a top row team. They struggled against Zebre recently. They did beat the Sharks away, but then they lost to the Lions, so it's kind of been a bit of a mixed bag. They're in 7th on the table, so not entirely different. Scarlets are another one that kind of benefits a little bit from beating some weak teams recently. I think they did lose to the Dragons, but then they beat the Dragons. I think they've beaten Cardiff a couple of times. So yeah, the Scarlets, whilst they are ending the season on a pretty decent run, they're in 9th, trying to hunt down the playoffs. They're on 43 points. 8th is the Bulls on 48. Maybe 7th is a little bit high. I don't know. What do you guys reckon? And then Glasgow, who have been a little bit off and on. I think they've been kind of similar to some of the teams around them. They are up in 6th, which is the same spot they're on the table, so maybe that's fair. And then Munster are in 5th, so not able to make the top row. Munster dropped a couple, but have gotten back to winning ways in recent times. I should also say when I calculate these, I'm not looking at what players are playing. So if your team sends a B team somewhere, I don't calculate that because I don't look at every team's team every week and go, that's an A team, that's a B team. You know what I mean. So, the Bulls are in 4th. You can see there's still some South African teams to come. The Bulls, they've won their last 3 games. They're only in 8th on the actual log. But if we're looking at more recent results, the Bulls are certainly doing well. They started the season really poorly, but all their away games kind of out of the way early. And then when they've gotten back to South Africa, have looked like the Bulls that we all know and love. Leinster are here in 3rd. This is another one that I would say maybe if Leinster had sent their first team everywhere. I know they got Europe to deal with and Six Nations guys to rest and whatnot like that. Most recent game against the Sharks was a loss, but it wasn't exactly Leinster's best team. So I think if Leinster are playing their best team in the URC week in, week out, they're probably higher than 3rd. But like I said, they had a couple of weeks with no games, I think, when other teams were playing their catch-up games, and then they've had a loss. So they've kind of suffered on the way we calculate at the moment. The Sharks, with that recent win over Leinster, who were actually 1 week before, Leinster were in 1st. But the fact that the Sharks beat the top team in the way that I calculate it, that boosted the Sharks up. So they beat Leinster. They are up into 2nd on the power rankings, 4th on the log. And then the Stormers, who are on a heck of a run. And my son was very excited. He's on school holidays at the moment. I was sitting there recalculating these power rankings like literally for ages and saying things like, all right, Stormers. I was muttering to myself, Stormers beat these guys. And then I was like, typing in the margins and whatnot. And every time I would say Stormers, he would perk up because he loves the bloody Stormers. Stormers are on a 6-game winning run. They're 2nd on the log, behind only Leinster, 52 points. So they're only just ahead of teams like the Sharks, Munster, Ulster, who are all on like 51. Glasgow are on 50. But certainly in terms of recent times, the Stormers are one of the form teams to beat. So I'm not entirely unhappy with them being kind of either 1st or 2nd at the moment. Remember, next year, I'm assuming we're having South African teams in Europe, right? So these guys may not be able to always play their first team in the URC. We will see how the management goes. But yes, for all the people that have been asking, here are the power rankings. I will repeat myself to say I'm not really that chuffed with the way they turn out, but it's a good chance for me to rejig them for next year. So maybe a little bit of competition-specific tinkering needed. But anyway, do give me some feedback, guys. I know they're not right, but yeah, you guys let me know what your thoughts are. Who do you think's too high? Who do you think's too low? Which teams do you actually think are pretty much spot on? And yeah, I'll take that into consideration when I give these a crack for next year, because I love doing the power rankings. I love it. They're one of my favorite things to do. Not one of my favorites to go back and redo weeks and weeks of results, but fingers crossed next year we'll get kind of a standard season, which is you know, without delays and cancelled games and rejigged games and stuff. So yeah, fingers crossed. You guys have any thoughts? Talk to you guys again soon. See you later.